Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into dusty sandals and marching back into a time when Persian generals didn't just conquer entire regions, they occasionally decided to hang up their swords and grow outrageously oversized melons instead. Yeah, not metaphorical melons. Actual, juicy, cannonball-sized fruits that made kings jealous and neighbors suspicious. You're trudging through a blistering plain right now, under a sun that's been trying to fry your scalp since breakfast. Your lips are chapped. Your sandals are questionable. And the general at the head of your column, Megabazus, is the kind of man whose beard probably commands its own division. You're part of a Persian expedition under King Darius I, which means you're invading someone. Again. Probably Thrace this time. Honestly, you've lost track. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step over a sun-bleached skull. No one seems to notice. Megabazus doesn't glance down. He's talking logistics in Old Persian, half barking, half humming. His voice rolls like thunder off the foothills ahead. Behind him, 6,000 men stagger in formation, sweating through leather, linen, and varying degrees of regret. You're his aide. Which means you get to walk close enough to hear his stomach growl but far enough not to interrupt when he starts muttering about crocodile traps or overly chatty satraps. The year is around 513 BCE. Your empire, the Achaemenid Empire, is about as close to global dominance as anyone's managed without GPS or the postal system. You've got territories stretching from the Indus River all the way to the Balkans. Which is why you're here. Darius wants Thrace. You want a bath. This is Megabazus' third campaign in as many years. He's 50-something, broad like an ox, and has one eye that squints when he's planning something clever or cruel, often both. He used to be one of Darius's immortals, those elite Persian troops who were never supposed to die, at least not where anyone could see. Now he commands armies and occasionally gets irritated by ambassadors with flimsy sandals and bad arguments. Right now, he's irritated by this march. The terrain's dry, the locals are twitchy, and supplies are late. You've had to boil your own boots for broth. One soldier tried roasting a hedgehog. You didn't ask how he caught it. As the sun dips, camp is pitched in a crescent of olive trees, their branches scorched by wind and age. You rub your feet while listening to a Thracian prisoner mutter something about cursed rivers and moon spirits. One of the officers is betting rations that Megabazus will have the guy flayed by morning. But he doesn't. Not this time. Instead, the general asks for figs, leans back on his saddle blanket, and says, "You ever think about cucumbers? Big ones. Bigger than your head." You assume it's a metaphor. It isn't. He's thinking of land. Not just to conquer, but to plan on. A courier arrives, panting, dusty, clearly regretting most of his life choices, and hands over a scroll. Orders from Darius. You lean in as Megabazus reads. His beard shifts like an omen. Apparently, the king wants a full annexation of Thrace. Total submission. Build a few forts, maybe burn a few tribal homes for good measure. Standard empire stuff. Of course he does, the general mutters. Then louder, we'll take the river crossings first. I'm not wasting another spearhead on hill people with slingshots. You nod dutifully. But part of you notices how long he stares past the olive trees. Toward the hills. Toward the fields. His fingers idly sketch a crescent shape in the dirt. Not a tactical formation. A fruit. Round. Obsessively round. Historians still argue whether Megabazus had already started planning his melon retreat during this Thracian campaign. Some think he snapped later, during his satrapy in Phrygia. Others believe he was always secretly more farmer than fighter, just buried under layers of armor and obligation. You sleep under your cloak that night with two thoughts. 1. Your canteen's leaking again. 2. Your general just compared his ideal fruit to a soldier's skull. You dream of giant gourds with spears for stems. By the next morning, you're back on the march, dodging snakes and singing half-remembered victory chants. Megabazus leads from the front. As always. His voice is hoarse, but his orders are sharp. You're halfway across Thrace before anyone realizes the general has started humming harvest songs. You wake to the sound of a man barking at his beard. Well, not exactly. It's Megabazus, naturally. But the tone, The ferocity, the way his words bounce back into his own mustache as if challenging it to a duel, that's what it sounds like. He's mid-rant, not at a person, but at the flimsiness of Thracian tent rope. Or possibly at his junior officers. You can't quite tell. Either way, his beard seems unimpressed. The campaign trudges on, now with cooler nights and hotter tempers. The farther west you go, the stranger the Thracian customs get. These people drink their wine unmixed, which is blasphemous to Persians. They tattoo their faces on purpose. And they apparently believe in tree spirits who whisper tax evasion strategies. Megabazus is less interested in tribal traditions and more in logistics. He's been running the numbers. You know this because you just spent 2 hours watching him sketch troop positions in the dirt using a charge stick and the jawbone of a wild boar. The general doesn't trust ink. Too smug, he says. You've seen him do worse. This is the man who once beat a Scythian champion with nothing but a bronze tent peg and sheer annoyance. A man who reportedly told a Macedonian envoy, "Your tribute smells like goat. You insult me twice, once by offering it, and again by carrying it in that sack." No one's quite sure if he meant the goats or the tribute or the envoy himself. But that's Megabazus. A legend among Persian officers. Not flashy like some. Not delicate like court poets. Just thick-necked, hard-talking, and endlessly competent. Darius trusts him for one simple reason. He always gets the job done. This is the same general who reportedly helped Darius rise to power after the false Smyrties scandal, the whole elaborate soap opera involving a fake brother, body doubles, and a group of conspirators stabbing their way to regime change. Historians still argue how deep Megabazus's involvement went. Some say he was just muscle. Others think he masterminded the entire coup from a garden bench with one sandal off. Either way, he earned Darius's gratitude, and that meant land, command, and the kind of authority that made governors panic when his shadow crossed the threshold. Now, as you cross another shallow river, you glance back to see him standing midstream, hands on hips, watching the water swirl around his boots. His cloak is soaked. His beard, somehow, remains perfectly dry. You know what makes a man worthy? He grumbles to no one. Wait. Not of gold. Of silence. Of waiting. Of knowing when to stop talking. You nod as if you understand. You don't. But that's the thing with Megabazus. You don't question him unless you want to spend the next week guarding a wagon full of manure under suspiciously hot conditions. He climbs the next ridge with the pace of a bear on a mission. When you reach the top, you see what he sees, the Thracian capital. Well, capital is generous. It's a fortified village with 3 goats and 1 smug priest. Still, it's the seat of local power. Darius wants it taken, catalogued, and taxed. Megabazus? He wants to insult someone. The parley begins with the Thracian leader offering dried fish and a garland of something that might be poison ivy. Megabazus sniffs it, raises an eyebrow, and says, "You know you're surrendering, right?" The chief blinks. "We welcome you in peace." "Peace isn't a menu option," the general replies. "But I'll take the fish." Later that night, you sit by the fire while soldiers strip the town of anything even vaguely useful. Megabazus doesn't join the looting. He's back on the ridge, sketching again. This time, it's not troop formations. It's rows. Parallel rows. Of what? You edge closer. They look like vines. "Have you ever tasted something so perfect," he says without looking up, "that it made you want to punch a god?" You blink. "A melon?" "Not just a melon," he says, "the melon. Big enough to stop a chariot. Sweet enough to make wine cry." You try to smile, but he's deadly serious. He's talking about soil again. About Phrygia. About how he'll one day retire to a plot of land with sunlight like syrup and streams so clear they whisper compliments. You don't know it yet, but this is the seed. Not the literal melon seed, that comes later, but the moment the general starts shifting from war to cultivation. From empire to earth. From conquest to crop rotation. Back at camp, someone lights the wrong pile of firewood and fills the air with the scent of burning goat hair. You gag. Megabazus grins. See? That's what's wrong with this world. Bad wood. Bad meat. Bad leaders. He stands, cracking his back with a sound like a breaking catapult. Soon, he mutters. Very soon. You assume he means the next attack. But when he looks at the stars, you swear he's thinking about melon yields and optimal planting seasons. You're not entirely sure how you got here, sitting cross-legged beside a makeshift fire pit, gnawing on something that might be horse meat, or might be saddle leather. Either way, it's chewy, and it's definitely not what you imagine victory tasting like. The war band has set up camp on the far side of a shallow pass. The Thracians are subdued, at least temporarily, and the soldiers are celebrating in that wonderfully Persian way, feasting like it's a royal banquet and then arguing over whether horse or oxen tastes more like vengeance. Megabazus, as always, presides at the center like some war god with indigestion. Tonight's banquet is extra questionable. The cooks roasted an entire horse. Not a tender cut or a select rump steak, the horse. You don't ask whose. You just chew and smile and hope it wasn't someone's trusted mount 2 days ago. The general, naturally, loves it. He pulls meat from bone with the ease of a bear attacking a roast. Juice runs down his chin. His beard, miraculously, remains pristine. You stop trying to understand it. Needs salt, he grunts. And time. You know what time does to melon soil? You blink at the pivot. It makes it fragrant. It makes it daring, he replies, dead serious. Like a spear that knows it's sharp. It's not the first time he's brought up melons in the middle of a military meal. The soldiers around him barely react now. This is just part of the general's mystique, brutality paired with horticultural foreshadowing. After dinner, the entertainment arrives. A pair of Thracian musicians, tied loosely at the ankles, play bone flutes and a sort of string instrument made of deer sinew. Their music is haunting and beautiful. Someone suggests they join the army. Someone else suggests eating them. You hope both ideas are jokes. You watch as Megabazus stares into the fire. His eyes reflect the flames like polished obsidian. Did I ever tell you about the time we crossed the Danube with no bridge? You shake your head. He grunts. Good. Because it was idiotic. And then he tells the story anyway. You remember the expedition vaguely, rumors of wooden planks laid across the river by Ionian allies, stories of armies marching over waters that had claimed better men. Some say they lashed boats together to form a floating bridge. Others say they used the bodies of fallen enemies. That last part? Probably not true. Hopefully not true. Historians still argue whether Megabazus was even present for the Danube crossing. Some records say it was Darius himself. Others claim Megabazus led the eastern flank, ensuring a smooth passage for supply wagons and sacred fire-bearers. Either way, the man before you tonight tells it like a myth. We walked on water. That's how it felt. Every step creaked. Every wave hissed. And the river, she hated us for it. He pauses, fingers still tapping a rhythm on his empty goblet. She swallowed 30 men that day. Just opened up and took them. Didn't scream. Didn't bubble. Just glub, gone. You glance nervously at your own cup. It's filled with watered wine and flecks of ash. You drink anyway. The alternative is chewing more horse. Megabazus continues, that's why I knew the gods weren't watching. Or maybe they were, and laughing. He leans back, the fire crackling louder than it should. Somewhere in the darkness, a hyena yips. One of the soldiers claims it's a Thracian ghost. You pretend not to hear him. Victory, the general mutters, is never clean. It's sticky. Smells like blood and old shoes. But you know what's pure? You brace for it. Melons. There it is. Melons don't lie, he says. You put your hands in the dirt. You water. You wait. And what comes out? Truth. Big, round, juicy truth. One of the junior officers chuckles. Megabazus doesn't. Laugh now, he says. But someday, when I've got vines taller than your wife and fruit sweeter than your mother's kisses, you'll wish you listened. No one replies. Mostly because no one wants to challenge a man who once stabbed an ox in the eye for sneezing on his sandals. That night, while the camp snores and farts its way into unconsciousness, you sit beside the fire with the general. He's still awake. Still thinking. He doesn't speak again, but you hear him whisper something, soft, almost reverent. Phrygia. That's where the soil sings. You fall asleep wondering what kind of song dirt can sing. You dream of endless rows of melon vines, stretching to the horizon. In your dream, they march like soldiers, proud and round, their skins glistening under a golden sun. Somewhere, Megabazus is laughing. Not his war laugh, but the warm chuckle of a man who's finally found what he's been looking for. You wake to the sound of arguing. Not the aggressive, spear-rattling kind. No, this is the quieter, more bureaucratic sort of bickering, the kind that smells faintly of ink, sandal sweat, and bad decisions. A group of engineers is standing at the riverbank, hands on hips, trying to figure out how to cross a gorge that's too wide to ignore and too narrow to respect. Megabazus arrives last, as always, flanked by an aide carrying his breakfast, 2 dates, 1 fig, and a piece of dried meat shaped suspiciously like a boot heel. He squints at the chasm. "Build a bridge," he says flatly. "Sir, the span is 2. "Build a bridge," he repeats, louder, beard twitching in punctuation. And so begins the great bridge debate. Because, as it turns out, the Persian army is good at many things: conquest, taxation, growing fabulous facial hair, but spontaneously conjuring wooden engineering miracles in remote gorges is not necessarily one of them. Some soldiers say to chop down trees. Others suggest roping together wagons. One guy proposes catapulting everyone over, which earns him a week cleaning latrines with a melon rind. A prophetic punishment, in hindsight. You, meanwhile, are stuck holding a scroll of possible supply routes that Megabazus refuses to read. He prefers what he calls strategic squinting, just staring at the land until it gives up its secrets. Then a Thracian prisoner, missing 3 teeth and roughly 40% of his original optimism, mutters something about the old bridge of corpses. You all freeze. "What did you say?" you ask. He repeats it. "A legend," he says. "From the old days. Before Persians, before kings. A warlord once built a bridge using the bodies of his fallen enemies, lashed them together with vines, walked across their spines like planks, crossed to victory. Now, historians still argue whether this corpse bridge ever existed. Some say it's a metaphor. Others think it was exaggerated from a desperate pile of bodies used as ballast. A few fringe scholars suggest it may have happened, but with captured enemy shields and armor, not literal bodies. Whatever the truth, the phrase sticks in your gut like spoiled lentils. Megabazus, to your horror, grins. He doesn't build a bridge of corpses, thank Zoroaster. But he does order every available tree stripped of branches, every cartwheel dismantled, and every hide and camp stretched into makeshift lashings. The result is something halfway between a bridge and a very judgmental raft. You cross it anyway, whispering apologies to every god whose name you can remember. It holds. Just barely. The army cheers. Megabazus mutters something about melons needing proper drainage. You're not even surprised anymore. By nightfall, you're camped safely on the other side, a little more paranoid and a lot more grateful for your legs. The general stands at the water's edge, watching the stars ripple in the current. One of the junior officers tries to impress him by retelling the corpse bridge legend, adding extra gore. Megabazus cuts him off with a grunt. "If you're going to make up stories," he says, "make them useful." You think back to that earlier dinner. The bridge story. The music. And that sketch he was drawing in the dirt. Those rows, those vine lines, perfectly spaced. He's doing it again now, dragging a stick across the muddy riverbank. Only this time, you can tell it's no battle plan. It's a planting grid. He scratches out a little circle and murmurs, "This one will be 20 hands across. Sweet belly. Pale rind. Needs sun from the east." You blink. You're designing melons? He doesn't look up. Melons don't disappoint you. Armies do. Kings do. Even sandals do. He points to your feet. But melons? If they fail, it's your fault. You nod slowly, unsure whether this is deep philosophy or just severe exhaustion. Someone tosses another log on the fire. Sparks burst upward like startled fireflies. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots. A soldier whispers that it's a bad omen. Another says it's just a fat bird with asthma. But Megabazus? He hums. Not a battle song. Not a funeral chant. A lullaby. You've never heard it before. You never hear it again. You lie back in the grass, staring up at the constellations. One looks vaguely like a squash. Maybe it always has. You just never noticed. You enter Phrygia like a guest who's just arrived at someone else's dream. Gone are the broken river bridges and sleepless marches. In their place, wide valleys, hills that seem to smile, and a fragrance in the air that could only be described as mildly seductive farmland. The dirt here is red and loamy, the kind that sticks to your boots and whispers ancient agricultural secrets while you walk. Megabazus breathes it in like a man who's been holding his nose for years. "Now this is soil," he mutters, almost reverently. "You could grow soldiers in this." He's not here to conquer, at least not in the traditional sense. He's been appointed satrap of Phrygia by Darius himself, a governor of this richly fertile land, which means more paperwork, fewer battles, and an endless supply of reasons to sigh. But Megabazus doesn't sigh. Not here. Not yet. He walks like a man whose bones are remembering something better than bloodshed. His tent is different now, too. Not the compact military standard from campaign days, but a sprawling golden pavilion with woolen rugs, silver tent poles, and one section specifically dedicated to thinking quietly. The locals call it the Golden Beard House. You sleep in a smaller, less golden tent next door, filled with scrolls, ink pots, and an alarming number of seed catalogs that Megabazus definitely did not request. Phrygia is already rich in agriculture. They grow barley, chickpeas, figs, and absurdly bitter apples. The rivers don't flood out of spite, the oxen are mostly cooperative, and the peasants are used to tax collectors with sharp spears and sharper accounting skills. But none of that excites Megabazus. He wants melons. You know this because he tells you roughly every third sentence. I don't need 30 crops, he grumbles, pacing between olive jars and wool sacks. I need one good fruit. One fruit to shame them all. He's got the space now. The satrapy palace includes a modest orchard, 3 granaries, and a tract of land known only as the Long Field. It's not long by empire standards, but it's long enough to plant the seeds of obsession. He walks the field at dawn and dusk, testing soil with his fingers, muttering about pH balance, even though that won't be invented for another 2,300 years. He's developing a theory of fruit grandeur that he insists comes directly from Ahura Mazda. You nod supportively. It's easier than debating theology with someone who once knocked out a Scythian chieftain using a ladle. The locals are confused. Their last satrap mostly collected taxes and ordered the occasional road built. This new one? He's building irrigation channels with military precision and paying shepherd boys to taste test honey varieties for melon pairing compatibility. One boy weeps tears of joy and says he's never eaten so well. Another vomits behind. A goat shed. Megabazus doesn't mind. Failure is just a seed that didn't want to sprout, he says, which doesn't technically make sense, but you let it pass. You help him convert a former barracks into a seed drying room. One wall is dedicated to drawings of melon varieties. There's the sun belly, the 2-thumb skullcracker, and one labeled simply the Emperor's Regret. That last one is drawn with flames and surrounded by stick figures crying. The general's obsession grows with the vines. He starts ordering new tools, wooden dibbers, bronze-bladed hose, ceramic water pots shaped like animal heads. He even commissions a traveling craftsman to make what he calls a melon compass, essentially a sharp stick with 2 arms that lets him measure spherical growth with military accuracy. Historians still argue whether Megabazus introduced entirely new melon varieties to the Phrygian region, or if he simply cultivated existing strains to freakishly large proportions. Some speculate he imported seeds from Egypt or even India, using his influence and a few veiled threats. Others believe the melons mutated naturally from overwatering and spiritual intensity. Either way, within one season, the vines begin to take over. First the long field, then the granary edges, then parts of the palace courtyard, until a small servant girl slips on a rind and breaks her sandal strap. You'll thank me someday, Megabazus tells her, not unkindly. You'll be known as the first melon casualty in recorded history. And indeed, you start keeping records. Height, weight, circumference, sweetness, peel resistance, fermentation rate, every factor logged on clay tablets now stacked so high your tent flaps are permanently stuck in a breeze-catching angle. One afternoon, a delegation from Lydia arrives. They're expecting the usual tribute exchange and maybe some small-scale groveling. Instead, they're greeted with slices of glowing orange fruit served on polished shields. This, says Megabazus, is the future. The Lydian ambassador takes a bite. He goes very still. Then asks, cautiously, do you serve this with meat? No, the general snaps. You serve meat with this. The man nods and asks for seconds. That night, as the moon rises over the vines and the stars glimmer like cold melon seeds flung across the sky, you find Megabazus standing alone at the field's edge. Empire fades, he murmurs. But fruit? Fruit remembers. You don't know if he's quoting something, or if he's just tired, but it sounds like scripture. And when you look at the vines, thick, twisting, impossibly full, you start to wonder if this man, who once conquered half the world with a frown and a sword, might actually have been destined for this all along. You're pretty sure that man is wearing perfume. It's the third time this week someone has arrived at the satrapy palace with suspiciously fragrant intentions. This one claims to be an Ionian merchant dealing in fish sauce and linen. You don't trust him. For one, his hands are too clean. For another, he smells like lavender oil and saffron. That's not how fish sauce people smell. That's how spies smell. Megabazus notices too, of course. He notices everything. He's sitting beneath a canvas awning, taste testing a melon slice thicker than most babies' thighs, when he squints up at the newcomer and mutters, either that man's selling lies, or he's trying to seduce me. You cough politely. Could be both. The general grunts in approval. We'll test him. Get the bucket. The bucket is, unfortunately, not metaphorical. It's part of the general's new system for evaluating visitors. Offer them wine, ask about their lineage, and then spill a bucket of water near their feet to see how they react. It's a terrible spy detection method, but weirdly effective. Honest people just get annoyed. Spies flinch like cats near a bath. The Ionian flinches. You raise an eyebrow. The general raises the bucket. Over the next hour, you escort the lavender-soaked guest to a side room that has been carefully curated to look like a study but functions more like an interrogation lounge. It's filled with comfortable pillows, a fruit tray, and one guard holding a curved blade. Megabazus enters slowly, slicing a melon with a knife that somehow looks more menacing than a scimitar. He offers a piece. The Ionian refuses. Wrong answer, the general says. Turns out, the man was sent by a faction in Sardis who think Megabazus is up to something unnatural, their word, not yours. Apparently, giant mutant melons make people nervous. They worry he's planning a botanical rebellion, or worse, a food-based cult. Let them worry, Megabazus says, dabbing juice from his beard. Fear fertilizes fame. Still, the incident sets off a flurry of inspections from other cities. Susa sends a representative. Lydia sends two. One of them brings a scroll longer than your leg and starts listing complaints before he's even dismounted. The general interrupts him with a melon rind to the chest. This, Megabazus says, is governance. What follows is a weeks-long parade of uninvited guests, all trying to figure out what the ex-general turned melon king is really up to. You handle most of the official paperwork. You also start sleeping with a dagger tucked into your bedroll, just in case another perfume-wearing diplomat tries to borrow a melon seat under suspiciously moonlit circumstances. One day, a scribe from Ecbatana arrives. He's polite, well-read, and entirely too enthusiastic about melon taxonomy. Megabazus takes to him immediately. They spend an entire afternoon debating rind thickness versus shelf life while you stand nearby holding an awkward basket of rejected fruits. By sunset, they've named a new variety, Imperator's Heart. It's small, explosively sweet, and apparently shaped like a clenched fist preparing for diplomacy. Your own melon tasting notes are more humble, tastes like a fig that fell in love with a peach. Historians still argue whether Megabazus's obsession with melon naming was part of a hidden code system, used to send secret messages to allies and spies. One theory suggests Two-Thumb Skullcracker was actually a covert warning to a rebellious satrap in Cappadocia. Another posits the names were just names. The man liked poetry, after all, even if he yelled it half the time. In any case, you soon find yourself maintaining not just melon fields but melon intelligence. You track where each seed batch is sent, who visits the fields, what they smell like, and whether they flinch at buckets. The vines become a security risk, a diplomatic tangle, and, oddly, a sort of celebrity. One evening, while watching the sun bleed out over the long field, Megabazus says, "Do you think the king dreams of this? Of fruit, I mean?" You shrug. "I think the king dreams of taxes. And immortality." The general grins. "Same thing. But you hear the note of something else, wistfulness? Regret? Melancholy about all those years spent commanding soldiers instead of soil? Maybe. Or maybe he's just annoyed the Emperor's regret batch didn't sprout this season." A breeze rustles the vines. The guards laugh somewhere by the granary. And you think, this was supposed to be retirement. But somehow, it's become another kind of war, quieter, sweeter, and fought with fruit and whispers instead of blades. You can't help but wonder what the next ambassador will smell like. You don't see it coming. No one does. The day begins like any other, sun slipping over the hills like a lazy coin, the vines already drinking in the golden light. You're in the courtyard organizing melon weights for tomorrow's symmetry contest, a monthly ritual Megabasis insists is vital to morale and precision agriculture. You're halfway through judging a particularly promising round-bellied contender when the general appears. He's not humming. He's not grumbling about pest control or sunlight angles. He's storming. And that never bodes well. Enough, he snarls, flinging a papyrus scroll across the courtyard. It catches wind and slaps a passing servant in the face. The man apologizes. For being hit. You blink. Enough. What? Paperwork. Tribute. These swine want a parade of nonsense, he growls. Do I look like a satrap to you? You pause. Technically, yes. Wrong answer. Megabasis marches past the melon beds, ignoring the careful irrigation channels he personally commissioned and the gently humming field workers who wisely scatter before his wake. He kicks over a measuring stick, curses a tree, and bellows, "Where's my sword?" You stare. You haven't used that in years, you say cautiously. Exactly. That's how long I've tolerated this farce. He barrels into the tent you call the Big Thoughts room, throws open a trunk, and pulls out the blade, a curved piece of iron history, etched with campaign notches and melon juice stains. By mid-morning, the palace is buzzing with rumors. Did Megabasis kill someone? Is he returning to war? Did someone insult the two-thumb skullcracker again? No, he's just done. Done with titles. Done with ledgers. Done with soft-spoken ambassadors and their perfumed lies. Done with middlemen who call his fruit operation eccentric in quarterly reports. He's retiring. Again. But this time for real. You and the other staff gather under the awning, watching as he issues final orders with the precision of a man cataloging his own legend. He reallocates land, grants a small endowment to a local school, founded for strategic horticultural propaganda, of course, and tells one unfortunate bookkeeper that he may now choke on the ink of mediocrity. You feel the shift immediately. There's no battle. No banners. Just a man walking away from power because it started to feel smaller than his dreams. Where will you go, you ask? He gestures vaguely. South. East. Somewhere with fog. Melons like to suffer a little. By the next day, his golden tent is rolled up. The palace is quiet. No one knows exactly where he's headed. Not even you. 3 days pass. A courier from Susa arrives, breathless, demanding to speak to the satrap. You shrug. We're fresh out. The man blinks. But the tribute is due. You point to the field. Take a melon. It's worth more than gold. He actually does. Later, you hear he sold it to a noblewoman in Sardis who used it as a centerpiece for a wedding and then commissioned an ode titled O Sweet Gore of Empire. Back in the now satrapless estate, you find a note in your sleeping mat. It's scratched in a firm, impatient hand. Keep them alive. Bigger. Better. No kings. No cowards. Underneath, a sketch. A melon, so large it needs wheels. Historians still debate the final days of Megabasis' official career. Some say he was dismissed. Others claim he resigned out of protest. A few even suggest he faked his death and started a new life in a coastal village under the name Melonox the Wise. None of those stories matter to you. You know the truth. The general didn't retire because he was tired. He retired because empires don't dream big enough. But soil does. You follow him. Not because he asks. Of course, Megabasis doesn't ask. He simply moves forward and expects gravity to adjust, but because you can't imagine doing anything else. You pack light, a knife, 2 changes of tunic, and a pouch of seeds wrapped in wax cloth. The seeds aren't labeled. They don't need to be. You'd recognize the weight of those dreams anywhere. The general is already a day ahead by the time you catch up, standing on a bluff overlooking what appears to be absolutely nothing. Just dry land, a handful of pines, and the distant sigh of wind. This is it, he says without turning. The place. You look around, squinting. There's not much here. Exactly. This is the retirement he really wanted. No palaces. No ledgers. Just space. Earth. Sky. You help him clear a patch of stubborn brush, both of you working in silence, letting the rhythm of the labor replace conversation. Your muscles ache. Your back protests. You feel oddly at peace. That night you sleep on a wool blanket beneath the open stars. A scorpion crawls across your sandal. You do not scream. Megabasis would only mock you, possibly by naming a melon after the incident, coward's kiss, or something similarly humiliating. By morning, you're already digging the first irrigation trench. He calls it the womb. The plot, not the trench. He means it metaphorically, you hope. The land, he insists, must be coaxed, not commanded. And he does coax it. With mulch, ash, compost, river stones, even fermented fig mash that makes your eyes water from 100 paces. The days blend. Everyone begins with sunrise inspections and ends with sticky fingers and new ideas. You see this one? He says, pointing to a sprout. This is the hollow emperor. I want the inside so sweet it makes your tongue lie. What about the rind, you ask? Thin as a coward's excuse. Soon, you've got vines curling like serpents across the red soil. You build trellises. Scarecrows. A compost pit that attracts every insect known to man and 2 small lizards that become unofficial mascots. Megabasis names them murder and diplomacy. Locals begin to appear. At first, they come cautiously, shepherds, travelers, a few wayward soldiers turned farmers. Megabasis greets them all with the same gruff hospitality, a bowl of melon chunks, a sharp-eyed stare, and a pitchfork resting nearby just in case they get ideas. Some stay. They help hoe, plant, and build. Others leave quickly, mumbling about mad generals and cursed gourds. One woman calls it a garden of the unhinged. Megabasis beams. That's the nicest thing anyone's said all week. You start keeping records again. Not of battles, but of growth, how long each variety takes to ripen, how it handles drought, which ones taste like heaven and which ones taste like regret. One particularly bitter melon gets named King Darius's Patience. It doesn't sell well. You fashion a crude sign near the field entrance. Welcome to the Great Patch. Enter full. Leave humbled. Megabasis likes it. He adds a drawing of a melon with a crown. At night, around the fire, the general tells stories, not of war, but of soil. You never thought loam could be this poetic. He talks about root depth like he once talked about cavalry maneuvers. He explains cross-pollination like he's plotting a siege. One night, he compares pruning to betrayal. You're not sure whether to laugh or take notes. Historians still debate how large his melons truly grew. Some say the average was no bigger than a cat. Others claim he once grew a fruit the size of a chariot wheel and gave it away to a passing trader in exchange for 2 chickens and a good joke. There's no consensus. But the legends persist. One thing's certain, the melons begin to change. Sweeter, rounder, more symmetrical than anything nature should allow. People from neighboring villages start arriving with baskets, eager to trade eggs, wool, even gold for a taste. Some of them cry after the first bite. One man proposes to a melon. You quietly nudge it behind a fence. Megabasis stands in the middle of it all, dirt on his hands, sun on his face, and something in his eyes that looks suspiciously like joy. This, he says, sweeping his arm across the vines, is what victory actually looks like. You nod. And you believe him. You're ankle deep in cow dung when it hits you. This may be the most important work you've ever done. Megabasis is kneeling beside you, elbow deep in soil, muttering to himself like a priest in the middle of a very organic sermon. Around you, the patch is in its full chaotic glory, twisting vines, buzzing bees, and rows upon rows of melons so precisely spaced you could march a platoon between them. This one, he says, pointing to a mound, needs more nitrogen. The others? Too arrogant. They've forgotten where they came from. You raise an eyebrow. Their fruit, sir. Their legacy, he says, wiping his hand on your tunic. Act like it. You sigh. This is the heart of it now, the soil. The rich, hot, sticky miracle maker. The general swears he's found the perfect blend, equal parts compost, crushed olive pit, fermented fish bits, and, of course, the ever-glorious cow dung. You're skeptical. But the vines don't lie. Every morning begins with dirt. Testing it, turning it, whispering to it like it owes you money. And it works. The melons grow faster, fuller. The sweetness spikes. The rinds shimmer faintly in the morning sun like divine bowling balls. You build shade shelters for delicate vines and tiny trellis hammocks for those that need emotional support, according to Megabasis. He insists certain melon breeds suffer from inferiority complexes. You stop arguing with him around week 2. One day, a traveling merchant arrives. claims to have heard about the great fruit of the mad satrap. He wants to see it. You take him to the back field, unveil a perfectly round, deeply fragrant melon, and watch his eyes bulge like a startled goat. "I'll pay 5 gold for the seeds," he says. You shake your head. "We don't sell seeds." 10. Still no. He leans in. "What if I bring you a horse that sings?" You blink. "What?" He shrugs. "Worth a try. The seeds are sacred. That's the rule." Megabasis is firm. He says once you start selling the means of greatness, you dilute its soul. You don't auction off your ancestors, he growls. You grow them. Historians still argue whether the general truly developed a new soil method based on rotating ash layers with decayed melon pulp. The few tablets that reference it are vague, poetic, and slightly sticky. Some scholars believe he was pioneering pre-modern compost science. Others think he was just winging it with whatever smelled the least offensive on a hot day. But here's what you know, the earth here is different. Alive, almost. It pulses underfoot, hums in the evening, and sometimes, just sometimes, smells like rain before it arrives. Megabasis takes you to the high ridge one evening, melon slice in hand, and points down at the patch. You know what this is? You brace yourself. A field? A map. He says each row, each vine, each melon is a memory. A campaign turned into sweetness. A battle rerouted through seeds and dirt. His first victory is a patch of striped oval melons that burst if you look at them wrong. The Thracian campaign is a squat greenish fruit that stinks slightly but tastes like victory wine. The Danube crossing? Long and narrow melons with rinds so tough you can hear them sigh when you cut them open. You're farming nostalgia, you say. No, he replies. I'm farming truth. The truth tastes good. Too good, maybe. Because more visitors are coming now. Some bring empty baskets. Others bring questions. One arrives with a scroll asking about his official melon export policy, which makes Megabasis laugh so hard he chokes on a seed. Export, he wheezes. You don't export soul food. You invite it. So he does. Kind of. He starts letting certain locals pick a melon if they can answer 3 questions. 1. What's the best month to plant regret? 2. How much sunlight does vengeance need? 3. What's sweeter, victory or peace? There are no wrong answers. But there are better ones. Word spreads. The patch becomes not just a garden, but a place of pilgrimage. People come for the fruit, but they stay for the mystery. You watch a boy whisper to a sprouting vine. You see a widow bury her wedding ring at the base of a seed mound. One man claims his back pain vanished after hugging a particularly large melon. You roll your eyes. But the vines just keep growing. One night, lightning dances on the distant hills, illuminating the patch in flashes of silver. Megabasis doesn't flinch. He just watches it all with arms crossed and a half-smile on his face. I used to think power came from swords, he says softly. Turns out, it comes from worms. You blink. Like, earthworms? He nods. Tiny, persistent soldiers of truth. Never underestimate the squishy. You fall asleep that night under a blanket of damp grass, the scent of soil in your nose, your hands stained with the day's labor. Somewhere in the vines, the melons pulse, slow and steady, like the quiet heartbeats of an empire reimagined. You're tying up vines with twine that smells suspiciously like goat when a breathless boy arrives on a donkey so small it looks like a stolen toy. He doesn't dismount. He just flops forward dramatically and gasps, "The king has heard." You drop the twine. Megabasis doesn't even look up from the melon he's cradling like a beloved dog. He just says, "Took him long enough." The boy stammers something about scrolls and messengers and a caravan on the way. You tune him out. Because you already know what's coming. The moment those melon slices started circulating at regional banquets, courtesy of ambitious envoys and nosy spice traders, it was only a matter of time before the court in Susa caught wind. The rumors were too weird to ignore. A retired general growing absurdly large, suspiciously flavorful melons? Sounds like a metaphor. But also, maybe not. So now, the king wants a taste. You panic. The vines are in good shape, sure, but not royal inspection shape. You run around polishing melon rinds with goat fat cloths and barking orders at farmers who definitely outrank you in melon wisdom. Megabasis? He stretches, farts audibly, and says, "Good. Let the king come." You ask, shouldn't we prepare an official welcome? Flowers? Dancers? An extremely staged melon cutting? He waves a hand. Just slice the good one. You know the good one. It's been growing in the shaded east corner, nestled between two protective stone walls and watched over by a particularly stern goose. You've never touched it without whispering apologies. Its rind has a faint glimmer, like sunlit bronze. Megabazus calls it the belly of destiny. The king's men arrive 3 days later. Not the king himself, of course. Darius isn't about to travel into the melon wilderness for fruit. But his delegation is massive. 20 camels, 40 soldiers, 5 advisors, and 1 poet with no eyebrows. They descend on the patch like suspicious archaeologists, touching things, smelling things. One of them pokes a melon with his stylus. You almost tackle him. Megabazus raises an eyebrow and growls, "Touch it again and you'll be eating stylus soup." The royal advisor steps forward, tight robes, tighter smile, and announces, "The great king wishes to understand the strategic purpose of this project." You almost laugh. You don't. Megabazus takes a bite of melon, chews slowly, and says, "The strategy is flavor. The weapon is delight." You watch as the delegation inspects the fields. They take notes. Measurements. One of them starts muttering about tax implications for agricultural yields. Another theorizes the general is hiding troops under the melon beds. That same man later screams and runs when a rabbit pops out of a compost pile. Eventually, they are led to the belly of destiny. A ceremonial rug is laid out. A table is scrubbed clean. The melon is presented like a sacred text. You do the honors, knife in hand, trembling slightly, you cut through the rind. It gives way like warm butter. The inside glows. Not figuratively. Not metaphorically. It glows. The scent alone could humble a god. You pass slices. Slowly. Carefully. The advisors eat in silence. The poet begins weeping. No one speaks for a full minute. Finally, the oldest among them, a man with more wrinkles than memories, whispers, "By the stars, it sings." Megabazus smiles. Historians still argue about the event. Some claim the king's men tried to take seeds by force, prompting a dramatic standoff involving shovels and the goose. Others say they left peacefully, thoroughly embarrassed by their own skepticism and slightly addicted to melon. A few scrolls even mention an imperial recommendation for Megabazus to return to court and serve as royal fruit advisor. That invitation was never accepted. After they leave, Megabazus doesn't celebrate. He just returns to the fields, checks a vine, and mutters, "Too much sun on this one. Tell the worms to be more strategic." You try to thank him for letting you cut the melon. He waves it off. You've earned it. You know how to slice gently. That matters. You look around the field, now quiet again, the vines rustling softly in the wind like parchment pages of a living story. The melon scraps are gone. The poet's tears have dried. But something's changed. The Empire knows now. This patch, these seeds, this ridiculous, radiant dream, it's no longer hidden. And that means it's no longer safe. You sleep lightly that night, dagger under your mat again, listening to the distant wind rattle the trellises. The patch breathes on. You're woken by footsteps. Soft, sneaky, not goat-like. That's always your first check these days, goat or not goat. This? Definitely not goat. You slide out of your cot, toes silent in the dew-soaked grass, and crouch low by the edge of the melon patch. Moonlight casts long shadows. The vines glisten. The night is so still you can hear the distant drip of irrigation from a leaky clay pipe. Then, snap. A twig breaks near the compost mound. You motion to murder and diplomacy, the 2 lizards. They do nothing. Useless, frankly. And then you see them, 2 cloaked figures, hunched low, creeping between rows. One carries a satchel. The other carries a knife. Both are headed straight for the golden curl vines, the ones Megabazus says taste like secrets and smell like victory. You're about to yell when the general appears. No warning. No sound. Just suddenly there, like a tree that decided to be a person. Shirtless. Holding a shovel. "Wrong patch, gentlemen," he says. The intruders freeze. One makes a break for it. The other reaches for something, maybe a vial? A blade? Doesn't matter. Megabazus hurls the shovel like a discus. It spins end over end and lands with a thunk at the runner's feet, neatly pinning his robe to the ground. "Now," he says, cracking his knuckles, Let's talk about agricultural ethics. You tie them up with melon twine, which holds surprisingly well. They're not locals. Their accents are off. They don't make eye contact. One of them has purple stains on his fingers, fruit thieves' dye, used by traveling seed smugglers to identify rare varietals. That confirms it. Seed smugglers. You'd heard rumors. There's a growing black market for Megabazus's produce. Traders, nobles, even rival satraps are desperate to get their hands on his seeds. Not to plant them, to own them, to control them. The rumors say one seed can fetch more than a camel caravan. Some claim it brings fertility. Others say it cures heartbreak. One pamphlet you confiscated called them nectar spheres of the divine underworld. Bit dramatic, but catchy. You interrogate the smugglers gently. Megabazus interrogates them, less gently. He paces while they squirm, brandishing a melon like a judge wields a gavel. Do you even know how to tend soil? He growls. How to speak to a seedling? To listen for the sigh of a thirsty root? They don't. Then what? He says. Do you deserve? He doesn't kill them. Of course not. Not his style anymore. He does, however, force them to work. For a week. Under full sun. No shade. Just hauling, compost stirring. You watch one of them cry while spreading mulch. Megabazus only grunts. Now he understands. By the end of their sentence, both men are burnt, blistered, and oddly grateful. They bow deeply, promise to never dishonor fruit again, and wander off toward the hills. You make a note in your logbook, melon justice delivered. 0 casualties. One spiritual awakening. But the threat lingers. You double guard shifts. Set up tripwires using melon rinds. Megabazus insists on sleeping outside, curled near the roots like a dog guarding its favorite stick. You think they'll try again? You ask. Of course, he says. Truth attracts thieves. Historians still debate how widespread the melon seed black market became. Some evidence suggests it spread across the empire, from Egypt to Bactria, smuggled in pouches of flour and hidden inside hollow scroll handles. A few scribes mention a melon cult that formed in Babylon, worshipping the fruit as a symbol of divine balance between sweetness and strength. One even carved a mini temple out of rind. It collapsed in the rain. Back at the patch, you develop a tracking system, numbered vines, coded harvest logs, and a secret marking etched into each seed batch. You teach the workers how to identify fruit tampering and install a decoy patch 2 hills over. It's good. Passable. But nothing like the real thing. Megabazus watches all this with quiet satisfaction. You know what this means, he says one evening, sipping melon wine. We've reached legend status. You nod. And legends get hunted. He smiles. Let them come. We have shovels. That night, you sit by the fire, listening to the hum of insects and the soft hiss of distant wind moving through vines. You glance at the field, where the melons swell gently under the moon's gaze, and you know, this is more than farming. It's defense. It's defiance. It's fruit with a cause. You spot the watering can before you spot the man. It's sitting innocently on the edge of the western trench, made of bronze, polished, gleaming in the morning light. Too clean. Too intentional. The field workers are busy collecting compost. You're halfway through planning a new shade netting system using goat hair mesh when something clicks. You call to Megabazus. He's elbow deep in soil, planting what he calls a quiet sprouter, a variety that takes 93 days and has the emotional maturity of a philosopher. He doesn't look up. Something wrong with the can, he mutters. I didn't put it there, you say. Now he looks up. Within minutes, you've got the field in quiet lockdown. Not the dramatic kind, no drawn swords, no shouting. Just calm alertness. You and Megabazus inspect the can together. It's heavy. Smells faintly of sandalwood. The spout is clean. Too clean. The inside? Lined with residue, clear, slightly sticky, like honey mixed with vinegar. A field worker dips a twig into it and watches it fizzle. Megabazus doesn't say a word. He simply lifts the can, marches to the compost pile, and hurls it so hard it disappears into the stink with a thunk and a cloud of angry flies. You both know what it was. A quiet attempt. Not a blade in the night. Not a sabotage fire. Just a subtle drip of something wrong into the root system. An assassin. With a watering can. The idea is almost laughable. But it makes a terrible kind of sense. Think about it. Megabasis growls. What's the one thing I trust more than anything else on this field? You nod. The water. Exactly. Poison the irrigation system, slowly, silently, and you don't kill the man, you kill the dream. The melons die. The soil spoils. The reputation collapses. An empire forgets. You double inspections. You assign water duty only to 3 hand-picked workers who've passed the general's extremely subjective tests of loyalty, one of which involved carrying a baby melon uphill for an hour without dropping it. That night, you patrol the edges of the patch with a torch and a short sword. Megabasis walks beside you, his old armor rustling like annoyed parchment. He doesn't talk much, just scans the shadows with a narrowed eye. You find the intruder near the east slope just after moonrise. He's bent low, cloaked, trying to get under the fence of vine branches. His hands are gloved. His face is calm. Too calm. Let him in, Megabasis whispers. You step aside. The man climbs through. Smoothly. Like a gardener. Like someone who belongs. He moves toward the irrigation channel, unscrews a small flask from his belt. Then Megabasis steps forward and says, "Your shoes are too clean for a farmer." The man reacts fast, drops the flask, reaches for a hidden blade, lunges. But the general is faster. Old bones, sure, but still built like a siege engine in a tunic. He sidesteps, grabs the man's wrist, and twists. The flask shatters against the dirt. A plume of smoke rises. You gag on the smell. Sweet, floral, wrong. The assassin crumples. Not dead, but humiliated. Megabasis stands over him. You water the wrong root, he says. You rot the whole orchard. You don't bother asking who sent him. Doesn't matter. Could be a rival satrap. A jealous noble. Someone who bit the wrong way in the melon futures market. The point is, the patch is a target now. But here's the strange part. The next day, the vines grow stronger. The fruit swells. The taste? Somehow, sharper. Braver. You see that? Megabasis says, pointing at a row of thick-stemmed melons. They felt the threat. You don't argue. He might be right. These vines aren't just plants anymore. They're legacy. Defense. Memory. Resistance. And maybe, just maybe, they've learned to fight. Historians still argue whether this assassination attempt was real, exaggerated, or metaphorical. Some scrolls describe it as the day the roots bit back. Others omit it entirely, focusing instead on the melonic resilience surge that followed. But oral tradition holds one line steady. Beware the man who defends his garden with war in his heart. Later that week, you install lockable irrigation valves. The workers joke about melon guards. You start naming individual fruits just in case. Megabasis names one vengeance bloom and gives it its own scarecrow. You don't sleep much that week, but the melons grow sweeter, denser, proud, and you realize this isn't farming anymore. This is survival. With rind. It's supposed to be a celebration. You hang garlands made of melon rind. You carve tiny lanterns from the smaller fruits and string them up with twine. The bakers from the nearby village have even sent melon cakes, some sweet, some oddly spicy, one that explodes slightly when cut. Megabasis declares that won a flavor ambush and demands 5 more. It's the first ever festival of the Great Gourd, and Megabasis insists on hosting it in a central patch under the full moon. Let the Empire see what triumph tastes like, he proclaims, which you suspect he says about a lot of things, including porridge and once, disturbingly, a fermented trout. You've invited villagers, traders, curious scribes, and even a poet who swore he'd only write in couplets for the evening. Everything's set. The air smells of roasted nuts and melon wine. The music is light, the laughter easy. And then the nobles arrive. 3 of them. From 3 different provinces. All dressed in silk. All wearing the exact same expression, smug curiosity. One says he's here to witness the miracle. Another declares he'd simply had to taste what the court keeps whispering about. The third just nods toward guard and murmurs something about exclusive distribution rights. You groan. Megabasis greets them with exaggerated formality, draping each with a garland made of melon vines and passive aggression. He introduces them to the different melon stations, the crunchy corner, the juicy row, the section of silent reflection, where one sits and contemplates a particularly beautiful fruit. The nobles smile politely. Then they see it. The centerpiece melon. The biggest one of the season. A shimmering beast called the sun's laughter, weighing as much as a baby elephant and resting on a woven cradle like it's royalty. It's meant to be cut at the peak of the festival. A symbol of plenty, patience, and vine-based perfection. One noble whispers, "Imagine owning that seed line." Another says, "That I can carve the first slice." The third says nothing. He's already rolling up his sleeves. And before you can stop them, all three lunge at the melon. Knives flash. A guard yells. Someone knocks over the table. The melon wobbles. Then bursts. The explosion of rind and juice sprays in every direction. Children scream. A scribe slips and falls into a vat of pickled dates. One of the nobles faceplants directly into what used to be dessert. You stand there, dripping in golden melon pulp, clutching what may have been a ceremonial skewer. Megabazus is silent. Utterly silent. That's when you know someone's in serious trouble. He marches forward, eyes fixed on the noble trio, who are now dripping, apologizing, and pointing fingers at each other. "You touch the fruit of peace with the hands of greed," he booms. They begin to protest. He raises one palm. Silence falls. "You will leave. No. Without your horses. You may walk home. And on that long, sticky walk, may you contemplate the sacred nature of harvest. And etiquette." They leave. Fast. The festival limps along after that. The music resumes, though it's a little more off-key. The children start a game involving throwing melon peels at each other's heads. A baker slips on a seed and briefly loses faith in footwear. But something's changed. The melon was supposed to be a gift. A joy. Now it's a story. A warning. A parable. The next morning, Megabazus surveys the damage. "Still smells sweet," he mutters. "You help clean pulp from the vines. Some of them have minor bruising, but nothing serious. One sprout even seems to have grown overnight, as if inspired by the chaos." Historians still debate the accuracy of the Melon Festival incident. Some scrolls claim it was a planned spectacle. Others insist it was a spontaneous breakdown of noble etiquette fueled by melon envy. A French tablet found in Cappadocia describes it as a test of who deserved the rind of destiny. That tablet was later used as a doorstop. You remember it as a turning point. From that day forward, visitors approach the patch with more reverence, more caution. They bow to the fruit. Some even leave offerings, rings, coins, small poems etched into bark. Megabazus takes it all in stride. "Let them honor it," he says, "but remind them, the rind remembers." And it does. You're sure of it. Because when you slice the next melon, it tastes even better. Sweeter. Wiser. Unapologetically round. The first melon tax hits like a stone in a wine jug. It starts with a scroll. Stamped with the royal seal, ink still tacky when it arrives. You open it with a pit in your stomach and read aloud while Megabazus stirs a vat of compost, blissfully unaware of the bureaucratic tremor heading his way. By decree of His Majesty Darius, Satrapy Phrygia and its dependent agricultural subregions shall henceforth be subject to the seasonal specialty produce levy, effective immediately. Melon yields above 3 bushels per household are to be taxed at a rate of... You stop. Megabazus looks up. "Did you just say melon tax?" You nod. He says nothing. Just slowly, methodically, sets down his compost ladle. Then walks over to the chicken coop and punches the door so hard it falls off. That's when you know this is going to escalate. By noon, half the patch has heard the news. The other half learns quickly, mostly by listening to the first half shout about imperial theft and fruit oppression. By evening, there's a full-on protest forming at the edge of the field. Melon farmers, field hands, even a goat wearing a protest sash. They chant, "No rind for the blind. No juice for the deuce." You're not entirely sure what it means, but it's catchy. Megabazus tries to stay calm. He really does. He calls a council of village elders and reads the decree aloud with only mild sarcasm. He offers a compromise, a ceremonial melon tribute to the crown once per year, no taxes, just honor. The elders nod. They love the idea. But the tax collectors? Not so much. They arrive 2 days later, 20 men in crisp robes with abacuses, clipboards, and absolutely zero sense of humor. They march through the patch counting vines, weighing fruit, and snapping at bees. One even tries to measure the girth of the womb. Megabazus steps between him and the vine. You measure my field, he says. You measure my patience. The man blinks, then writes something on a scroll and smirks. Big mistake. By sunset, the fields are in chaos. Villagers throw spoiled rind at the taxman. Someone unleashes a cart full of very aggressive ducks. A farmer named Sidov starts preaching from atop a melon crate, declaring the tax a sign of divine rot in the empire. You try to calm things down, but it's too late. The melon rebellion has begun. There are no swords, no flaming arrows, just flying fruit, very passionate shouting, and at least one man using a melon as a helmet. Megabasis stands on a mound of compost, arms crossed, saying nothing, just watching, letting the storm build. Eventually, the lead tax collector approaches him, robes stained, hair full of rind pulp. Sir, he wheezes, this is not the response expected of a loyal subject. Megabasis tilts his head. I'm not a subject, he says. I'm a gardener. Then he hands the man a melon. Take this back to Susa. Let the king taste what he's trying to crush. Historians still argue whether the melon tax rebellion was a true act of civil defiance or just an elaborate misunderstanding between accountants and idealists. Some claim it spread to nearby provinces, sparking copycat produce protests, grape strikes, fig sit-ins, one notable pomegranate pageant. What you remember is the tension. For weeks, the patch teeters on the edge. The crown sends more notices. The villagers dig trenches. Megabasis keeps planting. He refuses to surrender even one seed to taxation. Let them tax dreams, he mutters. Let's see how that goes. Eventually, the scrolls stop coming. No royal response. Just silence. And a courier who arrives one dusk, very quietly, drops off a single scroll with no seal. You open it. It reads, "We've decided to classify your output as cultural phenomenon rather than economic yield. No taxes. No interference. Keep growing." At the bottom, a small note. The melon was perfect. D. You read it twice. Megabasis doesn't smile. He just turns to the field and says, "They finally listened." Then adds, "Now, let's plant something troublesome." You don't ask what that means. But you do start soaking new seeds that night. Because rebellion, it turns out, grows best in fertile ground. You knew it would happen eventually. First it was the tax. Then the spies. Then the poison watering can. But today, it's spears. You wake to shouts, not the usual "a goat stole the melon basket" kind, but the sharp, metallic clang of someone dropping a helmet too close to the compost pit. You sprint barefoot past rows of dew-laced vines and find Megabasis standing at the edge of the field, staring down a group of 10 very confused-looking soldiers. They're not his. They were mixed uniforms, bits of Persian guard, scraps of satrapal livery, a few pieces clearly borrowed from caravan guards. They're armed. Nervous. One's holding a shield upside down. Megabasis crosses his arms. You here for war, or fruit? The leader clears his throat. We, represent certain regional interests. You sigh. That's code for, someone with money wants to own this place and couldn't figure out the paperwork. What kind of interests? Megabasis asks, tilting his head like a dog assessing whether to bite or nap. The kind that demand, surrender. You're not sure what they want, control of the fields? The seeds? A share of melon wine profits? One of the melons to marry into a noble family? Whatever it is, Megabasis just says, "Get off my dirt." They don't. So now you're at war. Well, sort of. You don't have soldiers. You have farmers. But you've got numbers. And worse, you've got organization. Years of measuring vines, planning irrigation, and organizing harvests have made your workforce shockingly coordinated. You grab a horn. Not the battle kind. The festival announcement kind. It still works. Within minutes, the entire patch is mobilized. Melon carts are turned into barricades. Irrigation pipes repurposed as makeshift spears. One very enthusiastic old man shows up with a basket full of angry bees and a plan that should absolutely not work, but just might. Megabasis doesn't bark orders. He simply moves through the field, silent, steady, like a god of gourds preparing to cast judgment. You ever fought with a shovel? He asks a boy too young to shave. No. You will. And just like that, the battle of the patch begins. The soldiers try to advance. They don't get far. Melon rind slicks the ground. Several trip. A field worker pelts them with overripe gourds from a treetop perch. Someone sets off a clay pot of fermented compost, and the smell alone sends two men running back to the hills. One soldier lifts his sword, just as a vine-wrapped pole swings into his knees. Megabazus appears behind him, shovel in hand, and calmly says, "You're standing on my best soil. Please move." He doesn't wait for a reply, just nudges him off the mound with the grace of a dancer who's also a bison. The enemy breaks within an hour. They retreat, limping, slipping, covered in pulp. One yells, "This isn't land. It's a trap." Another throws down his sword and weeps softly into a half-squashed son's laughter melon. You lose exactly 1 vine and 3 melon supports. Also a scarecrow, but he had it coming. You'd named him Betrayus. The field cheers. Megabazus doesn't. He walks to the edge of the patch, looks toward the hills, and says quietly, "This was a test. There'll be more." You nod. Of course there will. Historians still argue whether the so-called Melon militia really beat an armed squad in direct combat, or if the attackers just fled in embarrassment. Some sources say it was a symbolic standoff, exaggerated by poets. Others suggest the melon field became a training ground afterward, complete with morning drills and defensive harvest techniques. You know the truth. You sharpen your tools. You start assigning rotating watch shifts. You train your compost team in basic shield formations. Because apparently, you're not just a melon farm anymore. You're a stronghold. An idea. A quiet, green rebellion wrapped in vines. That night, you find a note carved into one of the irrigation posts. It reads, "Let them come with swords. We come with sweetness." You sleep beside your shovel. And dream of roots. They shimmer on the horizon like heat ghosts. 30 of them. Broad-shouldered, silent, marching in perfect rhythm, their spears like silver stalks, their armor catching the sun in pulses. The air grows still as they approach. Even the goats stop chewing. The immortals have arrived. You knew they would, eventually. You just didn't expect them to smell so much like mint oil and leather polish. Megabazus watches from the compost terrace, arms folded, face blank. You stand beside him, trying to look like someone who isn't completely panicking. They send the king's bodyguard to check on melons, he mutters. They send the immortals to check, you say. He grunts. It's a compliment. They enter the patch without speaking, boots light, faces unreadable behind ornate helmets. One of them bows slightly to the general. Another raises a small scroll. You expect demands. Maybe threats. Instead, the scroll reads, "We are here for sampling and evaluation." You blink. Sampling? Another immortal steps forward, removes his helmet, and smiles. "We've heard things," he says. "Big things. Sweet things." You realize with a jolt, they're not here for discipline. They're here for snacks. Megabazus blinks. Then shrugs. Then let the sampling begin. You escort the immortals to the center of the field. They move like a scouting party at war, spreading out, inspecting vines, sniffing soil. One kneels and whispers something to a sprout. Another salutes a melon and then slices it open with ceremonial grace. They gather in a circle. The tasting begins. You watch, fascinated, as elite soldiers, trained to kill in silence, now sit cross-legged, cheeks sticky with juice, grunting appreciatively as they devour melon wedges with battlefield intensity. One carefully adjusts the rind on his lap like it's a sacred tablet. Another murmurs, "By Ahura, this is sweeter than my last victory." Megabazus, seated under a fig tree, raises his goblet. "To fruit diplomacy," he says. An immortal raises his slice in return. "To the general who fights with flavor." You pour melon wine. Well, technically it's fermented rind tea with honey, but no one complains. One soldier starts beatboxing. Another brings out a flute. You discover, to your horror, that they've trained for festival behavior. These are the nicest invading troops you've ever hosted. One pulls out a notepad. "What's the sugar-to-shame ratio in this one?" You pause. "What?" "The taste. It's sweet, but it makes you reflect on poor life choices." "Oh, that's regretful dawn. We water it during funeral days." Historians still argue whether the immortals' visit was sanctioned by Darius or merely an unsanctioned detour disguised as a security check. Some sources claim the general bribed them with fruit to maintain his independence. Others say they simply liked the taste and passed along a glowing review to the royal court. leading to a secret fan club of melon enthusiasts in the highest echelons of the empire. You suspect both are true. As the sun dips low, the soldiers help haul mulch, prune vines, and teach the field workers basic spear drills just in case. A few of the younger farmers blush under their attention. One immortal named Faraz challenges your melon thrower to a contest. They tie. The melon splits in midair, raining juice on both of them. They high-five. That night, Megabasis holds a small feast. The immortals sit in a ring around the fire, eating grilled melon skewers and telling war stories that somehow always loop back to food. Ever get a Scythian with a fish skewer? One asks. Did it taste like regret? Everything does, if you overcook it. You lie back on a haymat, belly full, head buzzing from too much fermented juice. Megabasis leans over and mutters, "They're not here to take control. No? They're here to learn. To report. Maybe to understand how a melon patch held its ground against a system built to flatten anything strange." You nod. And then, one of the immortals steps forward. He kneels in front of Megabasis, holds out a scroll, and says, "With your permission, we'd like to grow one." Megabasis raises an eyebrow. A melon? A patch? A mirror of this? Not in the capital. Not under court command. Just a vine for each province. Rooted in peace. Grown in your name. The general goes quiet. Too quiet. Then, he nods. Just once. And the man bows again. The next morning, the immortals leave. Silently. Respectfully. One of them carves a message into the irrigation stone before departing. Not all wars are won with steel. Some with seeds. You touch the carving later. It's smooth, warm. The vines are already growing over it. Megabasis doesn't say much that day. Just hums softly as he checks the sprouts. And you realize, with a strange calm, the Empire didn't conquer this field. It asked for a copy. You're not sure whether to be worried or impressed. The old woman appears just after sunrise, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl that looks woven from shadows and goat hair. She walks straight into the patch like she owns it, steps between vines with eerie grace, and hums a tune that doesn't match the wind. She says nothing for a long time. Just walks. Observes. Occasionally stoops to touch a melon, whisper to a seedling, or shake her head at a weed like it personally offended her. Megabasis watches from a distance. "Who is that?" you whisper. He squints. Either a prophet, or the melon inspector from Hades. You're about to offer her water when she suddenly points to a vine near the compost mound and says, "This one bears a message." You blink. "You mean, the fruit?" She nods once. Then very calmly begins digging with her bare hands. You start to stop her, then pause. Because she unearths something. Not a melon. Not a stone. A seed. One you didn't plant. She holds it up to the sun. "Do you know what this is?" You glance at Megabasis, who is now approaching, shovel in hand. "A prank, you guess." "A prophecy," she says. "Oh, great." You brace for madness. But instead, she gently presses the seed into your palm and whispers, "This seed chooses when it ripens. Not you. Not the moon. It blooms when the world is ready." You look down at it. It's black. Smooth. Warmer than it should be. Megabasis, to your utter surprise, does not scoff. He just nods. "The melon oracle." You blink. "The what now?" He sighs. "A French cult. Popped up decades ago. Believes certain fruits are touched by divinity. That the perfect melon signals a shift in the world." You stare at the seed in your hand. She says it's a prophecy. "She also just ate a beetle off a leaf," he mutters. "So let's call it, cautiously intriguing. The oracle, because that's what everyone calls her now, sets up camp on the eastern ridge. She builds a tiny shrine out of sticks and rind, decorates it with carved melon seeds, and spends her days meditating under the sun. Visitors start arriving. At first, it's just curious farmers. Then it's mystics. Then it's nobles pretending to be peasants. They come asking about the seed, about the message, about what it means. You try to redirect them to the melon tasting station. Some listen. Most don't. One man brings a goat and asks the oracle to bless its future offspring. She pets the goat, feeds it a melon peel, and says, "This one dreams of figs." He bursts into tears. Megabasis starts pacing more. Talking less. You catch him sketching circles in the dirt, labeling them with symbols that might be astrological or might be melon phases. Is this getting out of hand, you ask? Definitely. He plants the seed anyway. Right in the center of the patch. A perfect little mound, surrounded by some warm stones. No name. No marker. Just hope. Historians still debate the identity of the melon oracle. Some say she was a former court seer, exiled after predicting a noble's baldness. Others believe she was a disgraced satrap's widow who found visions in fermentation. A few more poetic theories claim she was the living embodiment of agriculture itself. Regardless, she stayed for one full moon cycle. She gave 4 prophecies. One about a harvest so sweet it would bring peace to warriors. One about a child born beneath a gourd shadow who would speak to animals. One about a melon with no rind. And one, very quietly, about Megabasis. You don't hear that last one, but you see his face when she whispers it. Stone. After she leaves, the patch is never quite the same. Not worse. Not broken. Just quieter. Like it's listening now. The melon where the seed rests becomes a place of silence. People come to sit beside it. They leave offerings, honey, poetry, one sandal. Don't ask. No one touches it. No one waters it. And still, it doesn't wither. It just waits. Megabasis checks it daily. Never touches. Just watches. Some fruit, he says one evening, doesn't grow to feed the body. You wait for him to finish the thought. He doesn't. Instead, he turns and begins checking the usual vines, rind firmness, sun angle, leaf sassiness. Because while prophecy looms, the melons won't grow themselves. And even almonds, he says, need proper drainage. You never expect the final harvest to feel like a funeral. The vines are swollen with success. The fruit is flawless. You've cataloged every batch, praised every sprout, measured each curve like it was gold weight. But Megabasis walks the rows slowly now, quietly, each footstep heavy like it's pressing a memory into the earth. He hasn't said it out loud. But you know, this is the last one. The general doesn't look sick. He's still strong, still sharp, still scolding workers for improper pruning technique, but something's different. His gaze lingers too long. His shoulders sink just slightly when no one's watching. And every morning, he kneels by the mound where the oracle's seed lies buried and simply listens. You don't ask what he hears. Today's harvest begins before dawn. Lanterns glow soft yellow across the fields. The workers move with reverence. This isn't just another pull from the vine, it's an ending. One last flourish in a life that's been more myth than biography. You're on seed detail, collecting from the Emperor's regret row. The melons are perfectly round. They're set like sugar mixed with memory. You slice, scrape, and pack carefully, every seed a story, every rind a chapter. Even the dirt feels like it's holding its breath. Mid-morning, Megabasis calls everyone to the central field. No shouting. No ceremony. Just a quiet circle of tired hands and full baskets. He steps into the middle holding a single melon. You recognize it immediately, son's laughter too. The second ever grown from the fabled vine that exploded during the noble fiasco. It's golden, dappled, just slightly warm to the touch. He places it on the ground, then kneels beside it, and says, "You all know me. I've yelled at you, fed you, scared you, grown beside you." The workers chuckle softly. He continues, "But this isn't about me. Not anymore. This is about you. The vines. The soil. The future you'll plant without me standing in the way." You glance at him. He's not crying. Not exactly. But his voice shakes, just once, like a man saying goodbye to his best weapon. "I came here thinking I'd run from war," he says. "But this was the real campaign. One fought with patience. With roots. With rotten bloom and ridiculous insects. You remember the beetle swarm of year 3. The scars on your arms still itch in spring." He looks around. "No empire lasts forever," he says. "But a seed? A seed lasts a time." He leans forward, cuts the melon. The scent rushes out like music. Slices are passed around. Everyone tastes. No one speaks. It's the best one. Maybe ever. That night, Megabasis asks to sleep under the stars. No tent. No blanket. Just him, a cloak, and the soil he made famous. You sit nearby, sipping weak melon wine, watching the old general breathe in rhythm with the wind. The vines rustle like whispered farewells. Owls hoot softly from the hills. The earth, as always, feels endless. He turns to you. "There's a spot I want," he says. "For what?" "For after." You nod, throat thick. "The east row. Third melon mound. Where the sun hits first." You memorize it. You sit with him until the sky begins to pale. Then you go check the fields. Just for a moment. When you return, he's gone. Not in pain. Not in fear. Just gone. Like a fruit picked gently by the dawn. You bury him where he asked. Beneath the vines. Wrapped in linen soaked with juice from his favorite melon. You place 3 seeds in his hand. No markers. Just a row. A mound. A knowing. Historians still debate where he died. Some say he disappeared into legend, wandering into the hills to become a tree. Others believe he was taken by the oracle to plant stars in another sky. But you see the vines. You taste the fruit that now grows sweeter right there, sweeter than any that came before. The general is still here. He just changed form. You check the row every morning. The one where he rests. There's no sign. No stone. Just the mound. And the vine that grows stronger with each sunrise. Thicker than any before it, curling like a serpent made of sunlight and dirt. The leaves are larger. Greener. Somehow, quieter. The melons from this row are different, too. They're not the biggest. Not the juiciest. But their sweetness hits you behind the eyes, like a memory you didn't know you'd forgotten. People cry after tasting them. Not from sadness. From recognition. You call the variety general's legacy. You don't tell anyone the seeds came from his final melon, mixed into the soil as he asked. Some things don't need to be explained. The patch has changed. It's not just a field anymore. It's a pilgrimage. People come from farther than you can track. From Lydia, Bactria, Egypt, even from across the sea. They don't just want melons. They want stories. They want soil. They want to feel what made a warrior choose roots over rulership. And you've become the keeper. The old general's notes are still in the clay archive, his drawings, his seed charts, his poem about a melon that made him reconsider vengeance. You read them sometimes, when the wind is high and the vines sway like dancers. One evening, a boy arrives. He's young, dusty, traveling alone. He doesn't ask for food. He asks for seeds. You almost turn him away. But then he says, "My grandfather tasted a slice once. He said it made him want to plant trees where he used to throw spears." You give the boy 3 seeds. The real kind. From the mound. Plant them far, you say. But water them like memory. He nods. Others begin doing the same. A few each season. Quietly, respectfully. You create a ritual, simple, wordless. Take a seed, touch the soil, say nothing for 9 breaths. Plant, walk away. The vines stretch beyond the field now. Past the fence. Down the hill. Toward the river. One woman returns from Babylon claiming her vines sang during a thunderstorm. Another insists her husband stopped snoring after sleeping under a regretful dawn sprout. A baby is born beneath a melon trellis and given the name Bazus. A bit on the nose, but touching. Historians, predictably, are baffled. They trace the spread. They map the clones. They write scrolls with titles like The Gourd That Conquered After Death and Agriculture as Afterlife, the Megabazes model. Fringe theorists insist the general was a time traveler. A few even say the melons contain fragments of divine consciousness. What they can't argue with, the taste. Even dried, fermented, or pickled, it's there. That something. That whisper in the flavor. As if the fruit knows it's part of something bigger. As if it remembers you. One autumn, a scroll arrives from Susa. Not official. Not sealed. Just a note, scratched in an old, familiar hand. He did it, didn't he? D. You frame it. You stopped calling it the patch. That feels too small. Too mortal. You call it the row. The place where things change. Where swords become shovels. Where anger turns to sweetness. Where a man laid down power and found something worth feeding the world. And under that vine, each year, you plant 1 seed from the original mound. Just 1. You never know how it will grow. Sometimes slow. Sometimes twisted. Once, it didn't bloom at all. But then the next year, it split the earth with a sound like a sigh. You stand at the edge of the field. watching the sunrise paint the vines gold. The empire you knew is gone. Caravans no longer carry banners. Instead, they carry baskets filled with seeds and stories. Melon farmers have replaced soldiers, and the air smells of earth, sweat, and quiet revolution. The original patch, Megabazus's legacy, has become legend. His story passed down in whispered songs and 100 variations of the same crazy tale, the general who retired to grow melons big enough to make kings jealous. But this story isn't just about him. It's about what happens when someone chooses roots over rage, patience over power, sweetness over steel. You walk between the rows, feeling the soft pulse of the earth beneath your feet. The vines twist skyward, heavy with fruit, some glowing faintly in the early light. You pick a melon from the general's legacy row, smooth, warm, and impossibly ripe. The scent carries promises of rain and memory. You slice it open. Juice spills like liquid gold. The taste is electric, a symphony of sunshine, soil, and centuries of care. And you realize something. These melons have outlived empires, outlasted wars, outshone crowns. They are more than fruit. They are history. And the seeds? They are the future. You pack a basket. A few seeds for a friend in Lydia. A couple for a stranger in Bactria. A small handful to plant in your own garden. Because the melon patch, the great patch, is not a place. It's an idea. One that grows quietly. One that spreads slowly. One that reminds us all that sometimes, the greatest conquests happen not with swords or spears, but with soil under our fingernails and the patient waiting of a seed beneath the earth. You close your eyes, breathing in the soft hum of the field, the gentle rustle of leaves. And you smile. The general's dream is alive. And it's still growing. The night deepens as you sit beside the fields, the cool air settling softly around you. The vines sway gently, whispering ancient secrets only the earth understands. You feel the weight of history beneath your fingertips, the stories of battles won and lost, of a man who chose to trade his sword for soil, of dreams rooted in patience and nurture. The world moves fast, but here, time stretches, soft and slow, like the ripening of a perfect melon. You let your breath even out, your thoughts quiet, carried away on the gentle breeze that carries the scent of earth and fruit. There's a calmness here, a promise whispered in every seed and every leaf, that life, in all its forms, continues, growing beyond our fears and failures, reaching toward the light. So as you close your eyes, let the hum of the field lull you into peaceful rest, knowing that some stories never end, they simply grow, season after season, in the quiet soil of memory. Good night. Sweet dreams.